Human beings are scared. From the void we tumbled, emerging into this world as though waking from a dream, at one moment in immemorial darkness and now a blaze of unfamiliar light. Sensation and feeling and desire all cramped instantly into an unimaginably tiny frame. We are born crying, born wailing for food and rest and comfort and every other need that pounces upon us with a sudden and shocking necessity. Out of the silence we have shot like a bullet from a gun, a momentum that hurls us unrelenting through the many seasons of our lives toward an inevitable end. We control neither the point of entry nor the point of departure, nor really all that much of what occurs in between. We are, in short, finite, and finite is a very scary thing to be. Fear is thus old for all of us. It was amongst our very first experiences of being alive, if not the very first. Yet when we grow in the midst of those human beings who were here when we arrived, we seem to get the impression that they don't really get scared in the way that we do. In fact, all these adults seem perfectly happy and perfectly safe. They're not scared of the dark in the way that we are. They're not scared of the monsters on TV in the way that we are. So fear is not quite right, we conclude. Fear must be something that is limited only to our youthful ignorance, to our smallness, our weakness, our frailty. And once we're big and strong like those adults, well, then we won't be scared of anything anymore. So fear gradually slips through the cracks of the burgeoning years, sinks to the bottom of the soul, and there remains, whilst we continue to tend to the surface, cultivating our pretty little gardens, our images, our plans, our desires concerning what life should be, of what our role should be in life, of our relationship to the truth, and every other major question that we don't really want to think about all too much, because there are some pretty uncomfortable feelings that often follow. But occasionally, without warning, at those times in life that you can never predict, this fear swells and rises. Indeed, it swells so much as to submerge and upend our pretty cultivated gardens, to flood them with a sense of inadequacy, a sense of limitedness, a destructive deluge of fear that washes away all our safe, secure handrails that we've set up around life to ensure us that we're doing the right thing, that we're definitely not scared. Yes, the earth eventually dries, the water sinks back beneath the soil, and most people at that point will simply return to their gardens, tending what they can, trying to pick up the pieces. But if you clicked on this video, I imagine that you are one of those people who still feels the moisture beneath your shoes, can still hear the soft sound of saturation under your footstep. Before long, in the quiet moments when everyone is continuing in their habitual rites, in their daily duties, you feel yourself peeling away from it all. You feel a twang in your spirit, something has gone awry. It is as though you have seen behind the illusion, and you cannot quite look at it the same way again. When you come to walk away from dogmatism, you represent the ability to look at a given edifice of belief and critique it for what it is, to call a spade, to point out, no matter what his reaction may be, that the emperor has got no clothes. That leaves two people scared. It leaves you scared because you are about to incur the wrath of that emperor, but it leaves him scared too, because he is now revealed to others certainly, but perhaps most importantly to himself, as one coasting by on a false sense of security. He had until then threatened to crush anyone who would point out his nudity through means of menace. He had suppressed any claim to truth, any observation of his frailty, his weakness, his fallibility. He is, in short, using power and threat to run from, to flee his own sense of finitude. When you critique their dogma, Such people will become irate and desperate, often manically scrambling for subpar reasons in order to play the apologist and defend themselves, or even simply reaching directly for insult. This should be understood as the effect of fleeing from fear. No matter the extent of power involved, these are people ultimately doing little more than pining for and fighting to protect their favourite teddy bear. We all were children once, and as such there is a part of us still that wishes to suck our thumb and to curl up under the covers and be taken care of. Fundamentalism, dogmatism, the content that they engage feels a lot more adult, but the psychological principle remains one that is really rather infantile. Fundamentalism is a plush teddy bear that you do not need to think about. You do not need to do anything other than simply cling to it. And this clinging causes you to neglect other duties and capacities you may have that are ultimately far more important. Because after all, if your one inclination is to cling to the teddy bear, if someone comes along and says, well, you have a duty to be kind to someone, or you have a duty to tell the truth, but these things risk relinquishing your tight grip on whatever dogma you may have, you will naturally kick out and push it away because you only have one priority. Whatever makes you feel comfortable, whatever allows you to avoid the sense of fear, the sense of inadequacy, the sense of frailty. I would go so far as to say that this kind of psychological mechanism is very much like trying to make yourself into God. It is trying to escape your own finitude by means of willing something comforting to exist forever, in the same way that we as children want to hold our teddy bears forever and we become distraught when eventually we have to give them up, when our parents decide that we're too old. But there is a reason that the parents take the teddy bears away. They do so in a way that can't possibly be understood by the child at the time, but they do so, of course, for the sake of growing up, because they know that it's comforting now, presently, but it ultimately is harmful in the long run. And there is a far greater happiness, a far greater joy to be found in letting go and then discovering what comes next. So here you are. Perhaps an agnostic, perhaps an atheist, perhaps you would like to punch me in the face even for bringing up any sort of stupid label because you just don't care about any of that anymore. That's okay. I recorded this video really only to say something to you that I imagine no one else has in light of your recent departure from religion. You may not want to hear this right now given all the baggage this word perhaps carries, but that's okay. That's okay as well. I think I just want to plant it in the back of your mind to be something that you can return to when you're ready. In the coldness of life, without the teddy bear, away from the dogma, away from the fundamentalism, away from the forced belief, you are closer to God. Now, please don't worry. I have no interest at all in hounding you back into a church, mosque, synagogue, or the like, especially not with ridiculous threats of eternal torment. But I do want to make you know that you are vindicated and that you have walked away from something that is not simply bad in the eyes of general moral critique, which it obviously is, but more importantly, I think, it is bad in the eyes of religion itself. Fundamentalism, frankly, is false religion. It is utter failure to direct your life toward ultimate reality itself, and instead substituting that for a far more convenient and far more comfortable idol of your own making. The beliefs about God become more important than God himself. It is a superficial, facile means of expelling life's inherent complexity and difficulty for the sake of assuaging one's fear and allowing one true comfort. But in contrast with fundamentalism, there is such a thing as true religion, as religion that does not have the property of obstinate clinging, of manic gatekeeping, of all those other characteristics which are so manifestly ugly in the eyes of anyone with any sort of moral or aesthetic sense, and yet become justified and even lauded as virtues by means of religious justification. The official word for this kind of religion is mysticism. Perhaps you may associate that word with the occult or with clandestine rites and institutions, but in reality it's far more mundane than that. It's a matter of sitting still in the morning before breakfast, of breathing slowly on the bus, of whispering prayers over the computer at work, of holding the door open for your elderly neighbour when you return home. It is simply a matter of returning to your own being as it has always been, before doctrine or dogma, before rite or religion, before ideology or enculturation. Religion has to form institutions and doctrines for the sake of maintenance, but it's very easy to see how quickly these can become corrupted. It is far too easy and far too subtle for religion to slip from a true devotion to God to simply self-infatuation, an obsession with its own sense of rightness, its own sense of tradition and value within a given society. Religion without mysticism is a body without a soul. The key thing to note about mysticism, its prevailing virtue, is that it is continuous with life rather than set against or over it. It is not meant to be one sort of abstract system of belief with its own self-enclosed sense of importance and authority that then is imposed extrinsically upon your own life. It works the other way around. You begin with the aspects of experience that you already know and draw them out to their infinite, glorious conclusions. I remember when I was young and I would read and hear about words like peace and joy and love in the church when I was growing up, whether in sermons or in hymns or in the Bible. And I always felt a strange disparity between when I would hear about them there and when I would actually experience them in real life. I mean, I experienced joy when I was listening to Katy Perry or Bruno Mars on the radio on the way to school. I'd experience peace when I finished my homework and I could just go down and play on the Wii with my younger brother. And I experienced love when I'd get those butterflies in my stomach, when I'd see the girl that I fancied across the classroom. None of these things, importantly, were explicitly religious, at least on the surface. There was not chanting the name of Jesus or reading the Bible or reading any sort of sacred text. Nothing was there that would imply that this was a specifically religious activity. And yet there was nothing needed there to persuade me of their beauty and their brilliance. No one needed to admonish me, to insist, well, you should be pursuing these things, you should be finding joy in these things, because that was just apparent. It's just what they were. They were things that were inherently attractive. But bizarrely, whenever I returned to church, these same words would lose all their meaning. They'd be essentially vacuous and arid. They'd be weighed down, crucially, by a sense of otherness, a sense of an imposition from the outside, something leaning over my shoulder, wagging its finger at me, using guilt and shame as its modus operandi, in order to dictate what I should and what I should not like. The God of fundamentalism is a God who is other, who peers over your shoulder, as I say, who serves essentially as some sort of cosmic tyrant, who insists on his subjects having perfect obedience and never demurring from what they are ordered to do. But the God of the mystics is the God who is your very essence. And so devoting yourself to this God, being religious in this sense, is simply returning home, returning to your innermost being, discovering what you are. To find God is not to become a subservient sycophant for some brutal despot, but it is to find yourself and to discover what it is that you intuited, especially as a child, in those moments of youthful wonder when you encountered the world and saw it as good, as just inherently, indisputably good, and you were drawn to it and knew that life could be beautiful. That's much more like what the mystic is trying to capture again. Not an abstract dogma upon which you insist, and if you have questions about it, then you're a heretic or you're heterodox. Begin with your being, begin with your experience, begin with life itself, and then discover where that takes you. That is the adventure, the religious adventure for the mystic, and that is so foreign and so different to the way so much dogmatism conducts itself. Crucially then, for the mystic, there's really not a categorical difference between being religious and being alive. Being religious is simply a way of being alive such that you can realize most fully what life is. To feel free because you run in open fields or create beautiful art or just go crazy in the mosh pit at your favorite artist's concert is to do all of these things in God. The division between the secular and the religious simply doesn't exist for the mystic, because if it did, you'd have to believe that there was some sort of realm where God was just contained, and then some place also, unbelievably, where he wasn't. The primary locution of the fundamentalist is no. Indeed, fundamentalism is an entire system of negations, attempting to take every single thing in the world and hold it up to the rubric of a transcendent judgment, to ask the question of, am I allowed to find joy in this? Am I allowed to find peace in this? Will the divine parent berate me, tell me off, if I am drawn to this particular aspect of life? Notice that's always an abstraction away. It's always moving away from what we experience toward an idea, a principle, a dogma. Again, that is the effect of fear. The people who are most scared shut themselves up, put themselves up and away in the highest ivory tower that they can, because that is the farthest from the sense of insecurity that they can get. And the more powerful and the more violent and the more acerbic they can be in their condemnations of everything else in life, the safer they feel. Temporarily, at least. But it doesn't do the trick. It doesn't do the trick, and it never will. By contrast, the primary locution of the mystic is yes. A burning, irrepressible, beautiful yes. All of life, for them, is a call from God through every pretty sunset and warm smile, through every lofty star and singing bird, even at times through things like heartbreak and grief. Life itself is a chorus of divine solicitations, beckons for us to return to him, return to the source and ground of our being, stop skimming around on the surface with our own pretty gardens, and discover what the earth is really made of. To sit with it, to allow life to be as it is, to know that we are not in control, and that we are finite, and that we are limited. And that can be terrifying, but that's okay. Because we are not meant to become God in the sense of being infinite and omnipotent, and everything else that we try to be so frequently through our human effort. If you have left religion, if you have walked away from dogmatism, from fundamentalism, from hateful or untrue belief, I am proud of you. I said earlier that it makes you closer to God, and I mean that very truly. Insofar as you have condemned something that is hateful, that is ugly, that is false, you have already, at least implicitly, but perhaps explicitly, affirmed what is good, true, and beautiful. You have said yes to these things. You have, as you did when you were a child, before all of this later dogma, before all of this later enculturation, you have said yes to life. You've seen it as good, as something worth pursuing, as having value inherently, that you don't need to think about whether or not you should be drawn to it. You just are. You just are. And in this case, you have moved away from something that is really, truly horrific, and I can only congratulate you for it. Again, I'm very proud of you, and you should be very proud of yourself. Now is the time to take as long as you need. Again, this is not a matter of pushing you back to religion in any way. You may well never return to that religion from which you left. That's okay. Your path will be your own. But I wish only to elucidate the fact that that path has an infinite horizon. That you aren't just doing this on a whim. You've freed yourself from a malicious, closed-minded influence, and so you've moved towards something that, as I say, is immediately and ultimately infinitely compelling. Because, of course, how many good acts can you experience before you say that goodness has run out? Or how much beauty can you see in the world before you think, oh, well, beauty's reached its limit, I don't want any more beauty? These things are transcendent of their particular instantiations, and so can always re-articulate themselves again and again and again. You can always see more beauty in the world and not think, well, I've had my fill. I think for many people, especially in our generation, becoming an atheist, leaving religion behind, is a necessary, virtuous, and noble step toward God, which sounds to the dogmatist to be the most absurd thing that I could possibly say, but to me seems perfectly common sense. I wish only to make you aware of the fact that when religion is done right, it stands with you in this respect. It condemns what is false and horrid. It affirms what is true and beautiful. Taking it all as it is, not dictating to life what we think it should be, not trying to make ourselves into gods of our own volition, but coming and going, whatever life gives us, with whatever limitations we have, that's accepted. And in so accepting it, so much more beauty is discovered. The no of fundamentalism, the negation of fundamentalism is removed, and all of life appears a gift from God. Not just this tiny little corner that you have to be in, be in the God club just before you die. That's what's most important. No. That exclusivism, that isolation is of little interest to the mystic. It is a matter of universality, a matter of discovering God anew in each and every human being who has ever lived. And your calling is now. It has nothing to do with labels or identities, but it has everything to do with you. Thank you for watching. I won't even mention how long it's been. I won't even do my whole spiel about how long it's been. It's been long. I'll do better, I know. Thank you for anyone who is new, who's recently joined the channel. I appreciate your company. Have a look at my Substack. I recently posted there. And I will see you all in the not so distant, I should hope, future. All the best.